Alright, it should be on Wednesday that you're looking at this particular video. We're starting lesson 142, and really you should have already spent some time looking at an activity sheet, kind of learning 10C and making sure that you knew all the constellations and things that you ought to know. If you go to page 320 in your textbooks, I'm going to start asking you questions kind of about some of the picture that's there. So what we've seen in our book, 320 will show you the sky in the northern hemisphere. You'll notice somewhere about the bottom half of the page you'll see Ursa Major, you'll see the Big Dipper, and you will notice that the designers of this book did a good job showing all the pieces that you could draw some lines and find some more things. However, we didn't talk about all of those arrows, and so I would like to take a little time, since you can call this kind of our word bank for the questions I'm about to ask, but in just a moment I'd like to start looking at a couple things with you. First of all, I think black's probably good, but I wanted to start with writing stars. I wanted to do constellations, and I wanted to go to asterisms. Okay, so we have stars, we have constellations, and we have asterisms. And so if we take each of these, and I'll probably need more space in a little bit, but I'd like to go through and give you some stars, and I would like for you to match them with a constellation. And so just looking at important stars, I'm thinking long-term, thinking quizzes, I'm thinking tests where they might say, all right, so here is what you've learned, find the star, make sure you know an important constellation and an asterism. So I'm starting on 313 now, and I'm going to start picking various stars. So the first one probably that makes sense is Polaris. Okay, so this is Polaris, and you should be thinking, all right, what constellation is it in? This is in Ursa Minor. Now if you were saying Little Dipper, no, that is the asterism, and so this is the Little Dipper. Okay, and so that's the first one. The next star that we looked at was, and of course Ursa Major has no major stars that we ought to know. The next one was the constellation, or the star Regulus. Regulus. Let me fix this up a little bit. So Regulus. Okay. All right. Which constellation was associated with Regulus? You should be saying Leo. So again, you're looking at something like this, and I'm just doing a little bit of a sketch here of these. So Ursa Minor, Polaris is this particular star. It's the one you're talking about. This is the Little Dipper. Ursa Minor is a little more complicated. You've got Leo. You got this star, this star, this star, a couple down here, kind of the haunches in the back of the lion here that comes through, and so you kind of get your constellations that you can draw like so. Okay, and this is what they look like. Now, Regulus is found at this particular bottom section. This would be such a good thing to write down on a piece of paper or something so that you know what you're looking at. All right, the next one is, of course, what's the asterism that's contained within Leo? You should be saying the sickle. That's going to be this boxed portion right here. All right, so after Leo, we talked about a couple of others. We mentioned the star Arcturus. Okay, T, Arcturus. And that would be found in which constellation? Good, so you should be saying OT, since, okay, he's got the two dots over the second O. Again, it looks more like a kite, and so something like this with some extra pieces on it, so Bootes, and then of course got this extra extension. Now this middle star here is Arcturus. There is no asterism that is given in our textbook, at least. All right, after Bootes, you should be thinking of the next star, and that would be the star called Spica. Okay, so we've got Spica. That is in what constellation? Okay, you should be saying Virgo. Virgo, and again, many books put her differently, but some of them basically look like this, and so basically a stick kind of goes out into two different legs here, and one of these is Spica. There is also no major asterism inside of this. Okay, and again, you will see some of those on 315 if you need to. Okay, major stars, going through these. Which constellation contains this star? Vega. You should be saying Lyra. Notice the number of letters. Again, that's the main star at the top, and you've kind of got a diamond ring, and so we've got something like this. Connect the pieces, and you have the kind of the top one there. It's the diamond ring. Lyra is the harp. Those are the main constellations there. And so those would be your main ones. The next one I wanted to mention was the star Deneb. Okay, Deneb would be found in constellation Cygnus the Swan. And so remember, Cygnus the Swan essentially looks like this, and so you've kind of got a cross that you make. Now I said a cross just now, and so Deneb, by the way, is the one on the shorter side of the cross. This particular one's called Alberio, and so we'll focus more on Deneb. But over here, it's been a while since we've had a asterism, but this is the Northern Cross. All right, and continuing a little bit more, we've talked about a couple more. Deneb is very important, and so is Vega. In fact, these are two of the major stars that would be used in finding what's called the summer triangle. So take this one, and this one, and we'll get the summer triangle. And the last one, number 3, is Altair. And Altair is part of Aquila the Eagle. And again, Aquila the Eagle looks more like a manta ray, something like this, with a little tail. And so something like that with a little tail coming off of it. And of course, those would be our particular ones. Now, between the three, again, Altair being part of that, making up the 3. And so you've got a summer triangle, by the way, the brightest one being Vega. And so you get your summer triangle out of those 3 stars. Okay? If I were you, I would make sure I had this, and I would know this backward forward. I would make sure I knew what was going on. Okay, that would be the best review I can give you. From there, I'd like to review a little bit of how you find the constellations. Again, I'm drawing this kind of off memory, but remember what we said. When you want to find stars in the night sky, you want to start with the Big Dipper. Okay, and once you have the Big Dipper, of course, you use the pointer stars, and so the pointer stars should point to the Little Dipper. Okay, and it should do something like this. Sorry, no, actually that's wrong. It should be a little bit different because it should not point to just the bowl of the Little Dipper. It should point to particularly Polaris. And so it might do something more like this, make our cup of our dipper. And again, I'm not getting every star perfect, but you should have Polaris there. Again, Ursa Minor. You've got Ursa Major. We'll call it Ursa capital M. Of course, if you go down from the pointer stars, who do you hit? Okay, you should be saying Leo, and so you'll get Leo down here. Okay, and some of these you'll actually have quite a bit of fun with. Eventually you'll start to see it. You'll start to go outside and you'll actually see some of these things. Now, right now, the main one you'll see is Orion, and so we'll talk more about him today. Now, if you continue this way and you follow the arc, you go arc to Arcturus, and so you've got your Boötes constellation. Okay, and so here's Arcturus, and so we arc to Arcturus, and then we spike to Spica. And so this is Arcturus. This particular one is Spica. And really, this is kind of what we know. Also, going around this is Draco, and so he's got kind of a trapezoid at the top of there. But remember the tail, he wraps around Ursa Minor. And so these are all of the constellations that we are familiar with to this point. Now, there are, of course, asterisms involved, Spica, again, Virgo is kind of like a weird Y shape sometimes, depending on the book that you find. And yeah, just a beautiful woman, as you can clearly see. But this is what you know. Also, somewhere else in the sky, you're going to have your Deneb, Altair, and Vega. Let me go ahead and write those. So Deneb, Altair, and Vega, and those three make up the summer triangle. Also, one of the things you want to know about Deneb or Vega is that it's the brightest summer star. And so of all the things we said, this is kind of the main stuff you should have gotten from the last lecture. When I get back, I'll use more time to talk more through Stellarium. I noticed from watching the last video that it just wasn't up to my tastes. When you look through the video, there's some lag on the Big Dipper kind of appeared out of nowhere. I had to cut sections where I was talking, I was looking at stuff, but you couldn't see it. But anyway, thinking quizzes, in fact, you have your first quiz tomorrow over this kind of stuff. I want you to be ready for it. Well, let's get right into it then. And let's look at some more constellations. Well, if you look in the southern sky, you will notice that we have another constellation called Scorpius. Remember, we were looking in the northern sky a lot. Now we're looking at the Scorpion constellation. Scorpius is very simple. He's simply something like this. And depending on the book that you see, he may have a couple of little pinchers that come off. Okay, and he'll have something like this, go something like this, and then usually he has kind of like a tail that comes in. But you can kind of see the scorpion. Think, you know, the arthropod segmented body. You get your stinger back here. You got your cheilipeds back here. So I think you probably see the scorpion, but that's kind of what he looks like in the night sky. So the Scorpion constellation near the southern horizon during the summer. So what we're talking about now, really we're starting to move into more of a summer sky, but you can see some of these during the spring. Some of them may be very close to the horizon, but you'll see. Major star that you need to be aware of, that's going to be Antares. In fact, the way that probably this would have been said, if you see the word Ares, this was actually the god of war in Greece. In Rome, the god of war was Mars. And so you'll notice the two words. These both mean war, really. And so we're looking at both of the two. Well, the brightest star is Antares. In fact, it means the rival of Mars. And so when you look at this thing in the night sky, you'll notice that this particular Antares or Antares is, and by the way, it even looks like it kind of rhymes with Mars, Antar, this AR here. Looks a lot like Mars. It's a very bright star inside of the heart of the Scorpion. You'd want to be familiar with that. So Antares, about the size of Mars. It does mean rival of Mars or against Mars, as it appears to be a mimic of Mars itself. So here's a picture from another program, particularly StarryNight.com. Many times when I see Scorpius, it has little arms that come off of it, but you can kind of see the little tail that hooks back here. Many times this is what you'll see in the southern sky. You'll notice because of the terrain over here, you may not see Scorpius. Sometimes he'll kind of come up and you'll only see his little pieces coming out from behind the trees or mountains or something, but he is in the southern sky. Really, there's only two major constellations over there. Here's another example of Scorpius. Notice Antares in both pictures. So you've got Antares here, Antares here. It's the brightest star in Scorpius and the one that you'd want to associate it with it. If I'm you and I continued to make that chart from earlier in the video, I would put Antares and Scorpius together. All right, so the next one is Sagittarius. Sagittarius, of course, is the archer. And again, it's supposed to be a centaur. I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to watch Chronicles of Narnia or any of these mythological stories, but a centaur is kind of the man. It's a creature that has a body of a man and kind of the legs of a horse. Its entire bottom half is a horse. I draw it for you, but you don't want to see my centaur. And so, body of a horse and the chest, head and arms of a man. Of course, he's also carrying a bow. Now notice this particular constellation contains an asterism, and that asterism is called the teapot. or the Milk Dipper. And it gets a specific name as the Milk Dipper for a reason we will talk about in just a moment. And now his bow points towards the Milky Way. So if you ever have a problem finding the Milky Way, that's what we're talking about. And you'll notice he's got some really cool look here. Here's a centaur if you've never seen one. This is what it's supposed to look like. Interestingly enough, that's all it is. It's just these couple stars. Now you probably see the teapot very clearly. In fact, you could see it pouring down. You'll notice, who's this guy over here? Okay, there's a Scorpius. This bright star is Antares. And so you'll notice that these two are found in the southern sky. Notice the south marking here. And you'll see these pretty clearly if you actually go out and get a chance to look at this. Okay, so again, one last picture. I think this is very helpful. Just a beautiful picture. Again, this is none of these glowing creatures are floating up in space, but you'll notice this stuff over here on the right side of the picture. Many times you'll see this haze at night, and many times you'll see these in pictures that people take of the sky. Well, that's actually the Milky Way galaxy. In fact, that's why that teapot gets the name Milk Dipper. We live in a portion of it, but this is the part of the arm that we live in that we can see, the Sagittarian arm specifically. And so really the center of that galaxy, why it's so bright, is even just right outside that Milk Dipper. And so you'll kind of see this region over here of that Milky Way. Now we don't see it because of light pollution, but in certain places you might get the opportunity to see the Milky Way pretty clearly. All right, and so another picture that might be helpful, but that's what we're looking at. That's the teapot, short and stout, its handle and its spout. You can see it there. All right, the next one that we want to talk about is not necessarily found in the southern sky. This one is Cassiopeia, or Cassiopeia, but Cassiopeia. Constellation that resembles an M or a W. Many times if you go to a planetarium or something, you'll easily see this one. It looks something like this, and so you'll connect the stars, something like that. Depending on your orientation in the night sky, it may look more like a W or an M. It just depends sometimes which one you'll see. It's named after the mythical queen of Ethiopia, and represents a vain woman looking at herself in a hand mirror. Remember, a lot of these have to do with stories, and so this is easy to find from the Big Dipper. Mentions this, a line drawn from the handle of the Big Dipper, closest to the bowl, and through Polaris will point to Cassiopeia's middle star. So here's a picture. We see Cassiopeia there. I connect the dots for you. Here's a picture that might be helpful. So this is what they did in this particular picture, but what they were saying is that if you take this particular star right here, and you kind of progressively point it this way, it will go to this middle star over here, and you will kind of be looking at it. But the general point is it would be beyond the Little Dipper. Now, you see what they did. They said just go to Polaris, the North Star, and then go a little bit further, and you'll see Cassiopeia. It's the giant M in the sky. And again, these stars are so bright that they really do stand out. You'll be able to see them. The next one that matters is Cepheus. Cepheus, you'll find him on page 317. You'll want to know these. And Cepheus is a constellation which resembles the husband of Cassiopeia. He is, of course, important as well. It actually doesn't look anything like her husband. It looks more like a house. Again, they mentioned how to locate him. Imagine a line from the pointers of the Big Dipper's pointer through Polaris, and the line will pierce his roof. And so imagine a line from the pointers through Polaris, and it will pierce his roof. And so we'll point, I will mention this in a second, but basically, remember I said you go this way, here's your main star on the Big Dipper, kind of go this way, you'll hit the middle star, you'll also pass through Polaris apparently, you hit the middle star of Cassiopeia. But if for some reason you pierce Polaris and you go this way with the pointer stars, you'll actually shoot an arrow right through his roof. He is Cepheus, of course, next to each other. They're right next to each other because they're, of course, married. And again, it's important. So you'll notice your Little Dipper here. Okay, again, only just these two big stars are very visible. And so you've got your Little Dipper. Again, they pour into each other. Draco's kind of seen here. And if you're starting to see it, good for you, by the way. Some of this really you have to be an ancient Greek who is bored and trying to understand some of this stuff. but it is kind of fun once you know it and you know it well. All right, but you'll notice Cepheus looks like a little kind of a rectangle square with a triangle on it. Nice isosceles triangle there. Looks very good. So there you go, Cepheus. It's the house. All right, Andromeda. Particularly 317. This is Andromeda, the daughter of Cassiopeia and Cepheus. Well, there's a little bit of a story there. Of course, Andromeda, it mentions in your book, Cassiopeia was named after the mythical queen of Ethiopia and represents a vain woman sitting down and looking at herself in a mirror. I mentioned that because it really was, she thought she was so beautiful, so the goddesses cursed her, put her in the sky. And then, of course, at some point in the mythology, Andromeda, the daughter of the two, gets caught, in fact, by a sea monster tied to a rock, and there's a man who comes and saves her. Kind of a fun Greek story, but Andromeda is the daughter. She's punished for her mother's vanity by being chained to a rock and devoured by the sea monsters. Andromeda's head and 3 stars in the neighboring Pegasus constellation make a great square. I'll show you some pictures in a moment. Near Andromeda's waist is the Andromeda Galaxy, which is visible to the unaided eye. The great square is the rock she is chained to, and so I will show you some of this in reality in just a moment. Okay, looking at the sky, so notice we've got Cepheus here, we've got Cassiopeia here. By the way, the trick to finding Andromeda is to take the point of Cassiopeia, so kind of make one of the parts here, or really either of them, but this particular one right here into an arrow that will point to Andromeda. Notice the beautiful Andromeda here, just a V, that's all she is. Again, here is the Andromeda Galaxy. We want to talk about that. Andromeda Galaxy, this is the closest galaxy to us. We've got the Great Square, and then you have Pegasus, and you can kind of see a little horse head, okay, and his little legs. And I guess the square is supposed to be, you know, the wings of the Pegasus. But these are the main characters on this side of the sky at this time of year. And so here is Andromeda, just kind of this V-shaped thing. Cepheus up here, you got Cassiopeia pointing down, you got Andromeda. And so you'll see even some drawings in your book. Andromeda is actually just a line in your book, but they do find that helpful. Don't forget the Great Square. It is an asterism that kind of is part of Andromeda and Pegasus. But we will move on. Looking at another picture, again, the Cassiopeia can point towards her daughter. Let me get rid of this. And then you've got the Great Square. You've got Andromeda in all of her one-dimensional beauty. And then you've got the Andromeda Galaxy. From there, we look at Pegasus, kind of in the same location. Pegasus is a flying horse, Greek mythological creature. These don't actually exist, sorry. And so they're portrayed as the front half of the horse. Obviously, the back isn't there. It's attached to the Great Square. By the way, here it is. Andromeda would, of course, be hanging off the back end of this. In fact, kind of up this way. Okay, but Andromeda is just that line. So you kind of see, this is the body of the horse. Here's the little hooves. Okay, so here's the cylindrical hoof there, and so that kind of goes off here. Here's another hoof, and you kind of see the horse, and then here's your ugly horse head here. But that's kind of what we're supposed to see. Now, again, these again were Greeks who were just looking at the sky, having a little bit of fun, and some things just stuck. Now, of course, now you can clearly see the horse. There's no questions here at all, but those would be the main ones. All right, let's talk about Perseus, the hero. So Andromeda is trapped to the rock. In fact, Perseus rides on his flying steed. The Pegasus comes in and swoops in and saves the girl. In fact, Perseus is the hero who kills the sea monster and freed Andromeda to marry her. By the way, the brightest star in this particular constellation is Algol. Not Al Gore, that's a different person, but Algol. Algol is actually 2 stars and dims for 9 hours as the fainter star passes in front for a while. Kind of what's going on here is that you have what's called a binary star. So here's a star here, here's another star here, and they seem to kind of have a circular orbit. And then from the perspective of someone watching, the best eye I can draw, from the perspective of someone watching, these 2 stars shuffle places so that you only kind of see one at a time. and one of them is dim while one of them is bright, and so they continue to shuffle those stars. Algol is actually two stars. It represents the head of the monster. Now we know the story of Medusa. This is the woman with the snake head or snake hair, and that's who Perseus beheads, and so Algol is supposed to be the head of the Medusa. You'll notice the brightness changing because of those stars. So you'll notice Perseus here. Again, you might not see this much detail. Algol kind of being this major star that's the head of Medusa. She doesn't look very happy at all about having her head chopped off. But again, Perseus saves Andromeda. He's the hero. Here's another picture. Now that's what I'm talking about right there. There's a clear hero. No questions asked right there. That's the hero himself. Here's Medusa's entire head, this one line right here. Very fun. All right, speaking of heroes and more of just kind of the constellations everyone knows, we're on page 318, bottom left, looking at Orion. If you look toward the south on a winter night, you will see Orion. So even right now, we're still phasing into spring a little bit. We've started spring, but you can kind of see Orion almost every morning. Orion is a bright constellation that's very fun to see. The Mighty Hunter constellation, brightest of all constellations, many times mentioned in the Scripture, the Bible itself. Things like, canst thou loosen the bands of Orion, talks about the astronomy there. One hand holds a lion's skin and raises a club with the other, a sword from his belt. Many times we teach, people teach that he's holding a sword, he's actually holding a club in the stories. His belt is the most peculiar and obvious part. With binoculars, one could see a glow among his sword. This is the Orion Nebula, a massive glowing gas and dust. And so looking at this particular picture, here he is in the southern sky. Really, it's more of an hourglass shape. I'll right over here to the side. And so you'll kind of see something like this. And, of course, in the middle, this drastic belt. And so you'll kind of connect the dots here. The belt obviously connects, comes down here, comes in like so. Obviously from the belt you'll see kind of some stars coming down. This is where that Orion galaxy comes in. You've got these connecting here. And then of course over here you've kind of got your set of what is that lion's skin. It's not a shield or a bow. And then he holds the club up above his head. And so there's that. Okay, that's all Orion is. Now, Orion is important because it actually has several bright stars. That's why it's so important. Also, it's the second guide constellation. You can usually find things with the Big Dipper, but we're going to use Orion to find a lot of stuff as well. All right, so from there, let's look more at Orion. Orion, of course, there is your Orion Nebula, can be found in the swords, in the sword. Now, let's talk about the stars of Orion. Rigel, or Regal, I've heard people say it that way. He actually has three that I want you to be familiar with. Rigel, Betelgeuse, and Bellatrix. Notice we're looking at it from our perspective, so his left is actually on our right. He's kind of facing us. And so Rigel is his left foot. If I can kind of draw my picture again, he kind of looks like this. Okay, so here's Orion. Again, kind of like an hourglass figure. Kind of got his constellation and belt. Something comes in like so. Kind of got the tunic skirt here. Comes in. Now he's of course holding his shield, and you've got kind of the club that comes off like so. Now the top right one, bottom right, sorry, this one right here is Rigel. Okay, and of course you want to be looking on page 319. There's a picture there. At the very top right, maybe a little bit more clear. I said he was more hourglass looking. Your book will make this a little bit more clear. I'm going to detach his arm a little bit. So actually something more like this. Okay, and so connecting him together, and then that's kind of his main body. And you kind of got these three stars, kind of look like his eyes. But this one over here, top left, that goes into the sword or the club arm, that is going to be Betelgeuse. I don't know that I have the space for that, but Betelgeuse. Okay, and this other one right here is Bellatrix with a B. Bellatrix. Now I've been recently told that Betelgeuse actually means armpit of Orion. It comes from an Arabic word that literally means armpit of Orion. So if you can try to remember that, keep an idea that that's there. Rigel, of course, is the foot. This is a blue star. Betelgeuse is a red star. And then Bellatrix is the third one you want to definitely be familiar with. Three major ones, Betelgeuse being the biggest one of the three. Remember from the video we watched. Okay, so let's see how badly I did once we look at some pictures. All right, so you'll notice that Betelgeuse is found here on the top left, Bellatrix top right, and then Rigel at the bottom. The Orion Nebula obviously will be found there too. Remember, Betelgeuse is massive. In fact, Rigel is also pretty large. All right, so let's talk about a couple things. If you draw, if you take Orion, so taking the picture that your book draws, he's getting a slimmer waist this drawing, and so we take the one that our book draws like so. If you take the belt stars, these ones are the ones you can always find, and you go to the left, okay, you will find Canis Major. Canis Major, really you will actually hit the brightest star in Canis Major. This is Sirius. You'll kind of go up here and you'll see a little triangle, kind of like a puppy, okay, and he's got kind of arms and legs, and so he's a little dog. But that star is kind of like his collar shining on it. And then if you go to the right, you'll kind of find Big Taurus the bull. And so that's kind of where we're going with this. Again, Orion's going to be very important. Also, you can take from Rigel through Betelgeuse, draw a line going upward, and you'll find a couple more constellations that you want to be familiar with. All right, let's look at Canis Major then. That is the big dog constellation, Canis being canine, Major being big. You can think of him as the hunting dog. He accompanies Orion at his bottom left, and so he'll always be to the left. You'll notice that on Canis Major is Sirius, the brightest star. In fact, it's the brightest star in the entire night sky. You'll easily see it if you know where to look. Definitely something to go see in the morning before school. The rest of the constellation is very difficult to see in the northern hemisphere because it lies low on the horizon, but you will definitely see Sirius. So really what you'll see, if this is the horizon, you'll kind of see the little star that's Sirius, and you might see the little head of the dog, but for the most part his body will be below the horizon. So again, that's what they're getting at. Very difficult to see here. A line through Orion's belt stars going down and left will pass right through Sirius, the brightest star. So again, here is Orion. You are going straight left from the belt. You're going right to Canis Major, the big dog. And so that's what you'll be looking for. Now let's talk about what happens when you go to the right. Okay. As we go to the right, we find, actually not to the right yet, we're going to go actually up and to the left. Gemini, the twins constellation. Gemini, you probably know well, looks more like an upside down U. Different books draw them differently, but something like this, almost like the Greek letter omega, in fact. And so your book actually has a picture of them, but I'll probably just go to let my PowerPoint do it for me. And so in Greek mythology, these twins were named Castor and Pollux, which are the names of the brightest stars in Gemini, representing the heads of the two boys. You definitely want to know Castor and Pollux. They walk on the Milky Way, and so you can draw a line from Rigel to Betelgeuse and extend it, and you will hit Castor. So here is Orion. If you want to draw your hourglass figure, you'll get something more like this. Here he is. You go left, you will probably hit Sirius. Maybe that's what that is. I can't really tell from what I'm looking at. Go right, you'll find Taurus. But if you draw a line this way, you will actually hit the right head of Castor. Now, I do want you to know Castor and Pollux. Those are the main stars, and they're also the names of the twins in the mythology. Well, the one on the right and the one on the left, if you're looking at them in the sky perspective, Castor ends in R. So Castor, R, right. And so you'll notice that. Now, this particular picture was really kind and kind of made them look more like two people, obviously little stick men, but many books will just kind of draw the constellation like this, and not even draw, maybe even connect up here, because those stars are kind of a major part of it, so they might draw it in some books like this, so that you've got all the pieces. But that's Gemini. By the way, that Milky Way that you can't really see unless it's a really nice night, it will be right there, and it looks like they're kind of running across the Milky Way together, kind of hand in hand. Those are the Gemini twins. Okay, and so we continue looking, and of course I drew a little line here to help you see that a little bit better. Again, Pollux, Castor and Pollux, here's another example. So if you want to see Sirius, draw the lines going downward. You want to see Taurus, Taurus is right here. Go to the right. You want to go diagonally up, you will hit Castor up here. And so I'm going to continue to show you all the ways to find these. Taurus the Bull. Taurus the Bull, of course, is the Bull constellation and many times is associated with this massive V shape. And so, in fact, most of the time you'll see kind of a big star way up here, kind of some stars down here, and that's all it kind of is. Now he also has a shoulder. There's a really cool cluster of stars kind of in this region we will talk about in just a moment. But that's Taurus. Going down here to get rid of that. So it says the Bull constellation, he's a large V shape, and inside of that V shape there is one major star, and it's kind of the red eye of the bull. And that star is called Aldebaran. Some people, if they want to get really into it, they can call it Aldebaran. But Aldebaran is a large orange star that is one of the bull's eyes. Now it also contains a very cool cluster called the Pleiades, which is also mentioned in the Bible. So for the sake of just knowing that, it's a cool thing to know. So to locate Taurus, go from Orion's belt and go to the right. So here's Taurus, just the V shape. But if you want to find him, here's Orion's belt, you go to the right, and you will also see Aldebaran, it's the red eye of the bull, and you will also see this large cluster called the Pleiades. Now, if you zoom in on the Pleiades, you will notice that this is a very beautiful cluster, obviously quoted Amos 5:8 here. Seek him who made the Pleiades and Orion, who turns the blackness into morning and makes the day dark with night, who calls for waters of the sea and pours them out upon the face of the earth. The Lord is his name. What should you do when you see the stars? You should seek the Lord. And so as you look, you'll see these seven sisters, many times is what they call them, these little stars. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is actually the inspiration behind the Subaru logo. Okay, and interestingly enough, notice the seven stars there. Now there are other, it's a cluster of stars, but it's quite cool. All right, I'll give you a moment to take notes, look through the video and get whatever you need to, but I understand that there will be a quiz in the next lesson over the stars themselves and the constellations over 10.5. Good luck on that. I would definitely study over 320, looking at the northern hemisphere, and try to make sure I can know how to find things with the Big Dipper. Of course, at this level, I'm not going to give you a piece of paper and say, all right, find everything. I wish I could, but that's not how I'm going to do it. All right, so your proctor should have an assignment for you. Otherwise, you have a quiz tomorrow over the constellations. Thank you. You're dismissed at the bell.